screamer. Very well, I'll wait. You are no longer screaming. Are you calmer now? You have had a terrible shock, I know. The pain you feel will pass momentarily. You are wondering where you are, and whether or not you have died. The answer to your first question is complicated, but I will explain it to you in a moment. The answer to your second question is easier. No, you are not dead. Though by all rights you should be. Your spell backfired on you, and the resulting explosion would have destroyed your physical form entirely. Instead, it ripped a hole in the fabric of space and time and deposited you here. You are, in a sense, still where you were just a moment ago. You are in the haunted room. I see your memory is reforming more slowly than your physical being. Very well. I will give you the long version. To be fair, there are numerous spirits roaming the campus of the Octavian Conservatory of Magic. Saren House boasts an entire wing of the restless dead. But when students gather to drink and smoke and share their stories about their time here, there is one chamber known by wizard, artificer, and mage alike as the haunted room. The building containing the haunted room possesses a fairly mundane history. Nobody died during its construction. No exotic materials comprise its structure. No arcane architecture influenced its design. And no beings held its location sacred. The building itself is mundane in all respects, and is particularly dull for the Octavian Conservatory of Magic. The portion of the building above ground is a simple dome, like an egg half buried in the earth. The only visible feature is a heavy wooden door that allows entrance. Inside, a wide, railed landing offers a place to shed wet cloaks before descending the stone staircase that spirals down 6 stories. Every 10 steps down the stairs, a thick door leads to a large, featureless stone room used for testing students. Each room is identical, with the exception of 2 centuries' worth of personal sigils inscribed on the walls. One of these rooms holds fewer markings than the rest. It is the haunted room, and even the bravest students hesitate to enter it. Magic functions unpredictably in the haunted room, when it functions at all. Summoned creatures age to dust within moments. Divinations reveal gruesome endings. Some spells wink out a moment after being cast. Others last days or even weeks longer than they ought to. Occasionally, nothing happens at all when a spell is cast, only to have its effects appear at some later date, sometimes to disastrous effect. The professors act as if they understand what's happening, but they don't know any better than the students. At least once each year, some professor will enter the haunted room and study the walls, the markings, the air itself. They may cast a spell, often they leave without doing so. They never find anything, but the school loves a mystery, and so the haunted room will never be fully abandoned. You entered the haunted room, presumably on a dare from an upperclassman. Hazing rituals are common enough at the conservatory, and you wear the robes of a first year. You cast a spell, and as I mentioned previously, it backfired to horrible effect. You were ripped through the fabric of space and time, and now you are here, outside of both. Now that we know who you are and how you got here, I suppose you deserve to know the same about me. My name is Castell. I was a promising and powerful fifth-year student here over 400 years ago. No, I'm not dead any more than you are. I mastered most of the mystical arts in my first 4 years at the conservatory. By my 5th year, I was weaving my own spells and challenging 7th-year students to magical duels. I won far, far more than I lost, I assure you. I was on track to be one of the most powerful wizards Octavia had ever seen, and my commission as a half-mark, I would have been the youngest human in history to hold the position, was just waiting for me to graduate. I could have left in my 5th year and joined the military as a quarter-mark, but my ambition would not allow it. Instead, I turned my intellect toward mastering a particularly dangerous branch of magic: time. Against the advice of my professors, I delved into the study of time, and to their surprise, I made great strides quickly, advancing the study of time more in a few months than it had been in centuries. Once again, I had surpassed all expectations, save my own. There was more to know, more to conquer, and so I set about learning how to stop time itself and bend it to my will. I was in this very room when it happened. I had warded this particular chamber against detection. I wanted no prying eyes stealing my research. However, my protections proved to be too good, because when the unthinkable happened and my spell worked too well, there was nobody who knew what had happened. What happened to me was exactly what happened to you, only it was my spell that brought us both here. Your magic provided just enough power to trigger my spell for you as well. You're lucky, in a way. Because you don't have much power, you will not be trapped here for long. Relatively. Time does not move here. You will not age, and nothing that happens to you while you are here will affect you upon your return. In fact, it is entirely possible you will not remember being here at all. I'm sorry, but I cannot say how long you will be here. It will feel like days, weeks, possibly even months, though only seconds, minutes, or hours will pass in the material world. If you had more power, you would be trapped here longer. The spell is even now draining your magical energy. When you are tapped out, you will return. You will be exhausted, physically and mentally, but you will be otherwise unharmed. You are not the first student who has been trapped here. You are, in fact, the fourth in as many centuries. It suggests that you have promise as a wizard. If you survive your studies, you will likely go far. Well, relatively far. I wish I could help you, but unfortunately, I tried that with the first wizard who came here. She was quite promising. We did not know that her arrival was not permanent, as mine was. After some time, I taught her what I knew, hoping that, together, we would have the power to step back into time and space. It was admittedly slow going, but she picked up the concepts eventually. By the time she left me, I had taught her a great many spells, but upon returning to the world, she could not remember ever having been here with me. All she remembered was fear, a nameless horror caused by an experience she could not remember. Oh, I forgot to tell you. You cannot see the mortal world from here, but I can. I haunt this room like a lonely ghost, my presence undetected by all. Luckily, I can still perceive the outside world. That alone has kept me sane these many, many years. Unfortunately, the energy that seeps into the world from the temporal wound I created has driven off most of the students and professors. It was that energy that connected with your own and brought you here. The first visitor here surprised me when she arrived, and again when she left. As I said, we both thought that her imprisonment would be permanent, like mine. The second visitor did not come for close to 100 years after that. This time, I was prepared, and I forced them to learn as much as I could cram into their mind as quickly as possible. Sadly, they were not nearly so adept as my first guest. They could not grasp the intricacies of temporal manipulation, no matter how patiently I explained them. And so they were no use to me for escaping this place. Like the first, they eventually returned to the world from my prison, and, like the first, they had no recollection of their time here. Just a nameless dread, and a sense of terror they could not explain. I had to wait over 100 years for the next visitor to come. She was a beautiful sorceress, tortured by the music of the eight as all sorcerers are. When she came to me, however, she was suddenly free from the song. It could not reach her here. She wept with relief for days. We talked for weeks and struck up a romance that lasted years. She and I explored every aspect of love and romance. We had no secrets from each other, and had she stayed forever, I might have been content. But like the others, her power eventually drained, and she was torn from me and thrust back into the world. That alone would have caused grief enough for an age, but when she returned, she remembered almost nothing of me. She recalled only terror and anguish, and the sudden resurgence of the celestial song drove her mad. She had forgotten how to control her power, and I watched in sadness as she exploded into 1,000 motes of light. What I did notice, however, was that in her rantings, she remembered more of the pain and fear of her experience than the others. Before she died, she called out to her god to protect her from the ghost in the void. I can only assume she meant me, and that our connection was twisted by the trauma she suffered when being shot between unbeing and being. The heightened emotional state we reached as lovers seemed to help her remember at least that. I had another 100 years or so to contemplate this turn of events. If heightened emotion helps the mind retain its memories of this non-place, and if all that can be recalled is pain and fear, then perhaps the key to remembering me lies within those elements. And that, very unfortunately, brings me back to you. Perhaps if you are subjected to enough pain and fear, you will remember me when you return from the void. You recoil. That is to be expected. What I am going to do to you is monstrous. You may attempt to fight me if you wish, but I will prevail. You are no match for my power here. But I understand the desperate need to defend yourself against the inevitable. I am going to torture you, both physically and mentally. I am going to take you apart in ways you cannot yet imagine, but which I have had centuries to contemplate. Please know, however, that I take no pleasure in this. It is you are my last hope. One of two things will happen to you when you return to the world. Either you will remember me, in which case you will understand that this was the only way for me to reach back into the world, or you will remember nothing, in which case none of what I do to you here will matter in the least. If you do remember me, I implore you to speak to the librarian Xienzenko. They will remember me and can figure out how to free me, if anyone can. It will likely be another 100 years before another visitor arrives here. It seems to take a century for the energy to build up enough to break through. And I think that I cannot make it another 100 years. Humans are not Elova. We were not meant to live as long as I have lived here. I can feel the edges of my mind beginning to fray. Soon they will tear, and I will lose myself in complete and permanent madness. Nothing I can do to you will come close to that terror. Understand that this must be done. Now, we have no way of knowing how long you will stay, so I cannot afford to waste time listening to your pleas for mercy. Nothing you can say will stop this. I must break you. Please, forgive me.